Hey everyone, it's Jacqueline at Pixie Dust PhD. My partner and I recently bought into villas at Disneyland Hotel. I've had a lot of folks ask why we decided to buy in at all, and then we did also end up purchasing 150 points, so we're now full DVC members. I've also had a lot of people ask what went into that decision. So this video we will go over our rationale. Of course, this is specific to our circumstances. It may not apply to you, but I hope that it may provide some helpful perspective. First, for any of you who are newer to the channel and don't know, this is not our first Disney Vacation Club purchase. We did previously buy a 90-point Bay Lake Tower contract on the resale market, and we bought this after certain restrictions were put into place. None of those points counted toward membership extras. I can't use them to stay at newly built resorts, all that kind of stuff. That being said, overall that contract is working out really well for us. We tend to only go down to Disney World once every other year, so being able to pool points across different use years through banking and borrowing with our current use year for the vacation is going great. And we just traveled the two of us, so we stayed together in deluxe studios. 90 points in the current use year with a combination of banking and or borrowing has let us stay for over a week in Disney World in villas that we've been really happy with. So then why even bother adding on? I'm perfectly happy with my Bay Lake Tower home resort. We are good with the number of points we have, and we most frequently go to Walt Disney World. We aren't really Disneylanders. In fact, we've only been to Disneyland once in our adult lives compared to the many times we've now gone to Disney World together. A lot of this is aspirational for me in terms of what our future will look like. I'm originally from the West Coast, and my family is still West Coast based. At some point, my partner and I do want to move out to the West Coast. We don't have a timeline on that, so no guarantees there, but my family is on the West Coast, and I would like to host them at Disneyland. It is substantially easier for them to get down to Disneyland than it is to ask them to fly all the way from Washington State to Florida. And frankly, in my naive opinion, Disneyland just seems a lot easier to manage with kids compared to Walt Disney World. Alright, so I want to host my family at Disneyland. Great, cool. That doesn't necessarily mean I need to buy into villas at Disneyland Hotel. True. However, in our current situation with DVC, we can't even use our Bay Lake Tower points at villas at Disneyland Hotel. Remember, they are resale restricted. In principle, I believe we can use them at villas at Grand Californian, but the inventory there is so low, it is so competitive, I think even for people who own there, that's a good joke. I'm never going to get a stretch of nights together, especially in a larger room at villas at Grand Californian. Unless I wanted to buy a resale contract there, I guess, but that's even more expensive than buying in a villas at Disneyland Hotel. Essentially, to carry out my dream and future plans of hosting my family at Disneyland, I need direct points to spend at villas at Disneyland Hotel. And if I'm going to buy direct anyway, for me, I would much rather lock in that home resort advantage at villas at Disneyland Hotel. Especially because if I am hosting my family, that means ideally we would get a larger accommodation, and the inventory at villas at Disneyland Hotel for 2 bedrooms is quite small. So I think the 11-month home resort priority there is going to be critical. It's also worth noting that for other resorts that are not currently sold out, that are being sold directly from Disney at reasonable prices, I'm just not that interested in having the home resort priority there. I haven't been to Hawaii in about 10 years, so Aulani doesn't make a lot of sense to me, especially even when we end up going. I don't think we'll spend more than a couple nights at a time at Aulani given its remote location. The Riviera Resort is nice, no particular hate from me. I enjoy going and hanging out. I'm sure I would enjoy staying there, but I'm not so drawn to it that I really want to buy. Pretty much the same with villas at Grand Floridian. It's just not really my taste. It definitely is nice, don't get me wrong, it's just not for me. And recently there's been some pretty awesome promotions at places like Animal Kingdom Villas, which is great, fantastic for folks who want to add on there. But for me, I just have no desire to have a home resort there. And of course, pretty much all of the other Disney Vacation Club resorts that are considered sold out sell at a very high price directly. Last time I looked, I think Beach Club Villas was going for $275 a point or something, so no thank you. We also figured that with incentives being offered, the villas at Disneyland Hotel direct pricing would be the lowest it would ever be when it first went on sale. If we were planning on buying in eventually and we had the money to do it now, why delay? Effectively, that was the main reasoning driving our purchase specifically at villas at Disneyland Hotel and not just getting direct points elsewhere or buying another resale contract, etc. For some time prior to villas at Disneyland Hotel going on sale, and certainly more intensely in the weeks leading up to the sale, my partner and I talked a lot about how many points we would buy. We figured we would need at least 100, but we were open to 150 depending on pricing and such. We did end up making a purchase of 150 points, so we are now full DVC members with access to membership benefit extras. I know this sounds a bit hypocritical now that we are full members, but I fully maintain that these perks generally aren't worth it. Briefly, let's talk about why I feel this way. Sure, you get some discounts on shopping and dining, but it's pretty small, 10%, sometimes I've seen 20%, so I guess that adds up a ton over time if you're in the parks a lot, but we, again, only go every other year or so, so it's not that meaningful for us. I perceive the community thinks one of the biggest perks is access to the second highest tier annual pass, and I'm not necessarily here to argue that. That is actually a really nice perk that you don't have to buy the highest pass. You get to save several $100s per pass by buying that second pass, which is normally restricted to Florida residents. For me specifically though, because I don't go that often, we actually have never owned an annual pass. And pricing for dated tickets when we have traveled in the past and are looking at traveling in the future don't add up to be the cost of the second highest tier annual pass. If we use this DVC perk to buy the Sorcerer Pass, we would be spending more money on our annual pass than we would on our dated tickets. Granted, we might be able to make that money up with the dining discounts and such, but just because we don't travel down to the parks that frequently, this is not nearly as big of a perk for us. And I'm fairly certain in the long run would probably cost us more money. I've also gathered that folks love the member cruise, and I'm not gonna lie, I am kind of excited for this to be an option for us that we could think about in the future. That being said, I've also seen a lot of people who aren't members and probably haven't done their research yet talk about the member cruise as this huge, wonderful thing that you get to do a free Disney cruise. It is not free, you still pay for it. And I haven't looked into this very deeply, honestly, because until very recently I didn't qualify, but I believe usually one person has to pay on points and then the other person you can pay cash. And the points rate isn't cheap. I think it's always at least a couple hundred points. So you're spending a couple hundred points and then also probably at least $2,000, if not $3,000 to $4,000 for that other person in the room. Folks who have taken the member cruise, please feel free to correct me in the comments down below. I fully admit I have not researched this. I have heard the member cruise is really awesome. I've gathered that you get a lot of swag and it's a very awesome experience. But at the end of the day, the perk is access to giving Disney my vacation points and I think also a substantial sum of actual money in order to go on this cruise. And sure, you get the cruise out of it, so that's your vacation for the year, that's what you're paying for, etc. But that's, not something I would normally pay for. So for me, specifically in my circumstances, that again is more points and more money going to Disney because of this perk that I otherwise would not spend. Then we've got Moonlight Magic, which are these really cool after hours events. And these I believe are free. You do have to register, and I think doing that can be kind of tricky. But yeah, you basically get to go to a park after hours. There's a lot of weird characters, rides are going, all that stuff. Moonlight Magic actually does look really cool and is consistently probably the thing I am most jealous of when I was a resale restricted member. However, they also often are on a Tuesday or Wednesday night. This is very inconvenient for people who work the standard Monday to Friday work week and don't have very great flexibility in terms of working from Disney. We don't live super far, we are in the DC metro area, so it's a relatively short flight, just a couple of hours, but it's not the same as a couple-hour drive. If Moonlight Magic were a Tuesday night, we would probably fly down Tuesday, which means taking work off Tuesday, go to Moonlight Magic Tuesday night, and then fly back Wednesday, which also means taking work off Wednesday. We might be able to finagle it to fly down after work on Monday, stay Monday night, maybe work from home, but from Orlando Tuesday. Depends on what's going on in our work schedule. Sometimes that's allowed, sometimes that's not. Go to Moonlight Magic Tuesday night, maybe work from home from Orlando Wednesday, and then try to fly home after work Wednesday night to minimize time off work. But that's a very big question mark in our lines of work. We do both have jobs with the flexibility to primarily work from home, but I definitely sometimes have to go into the office, and that's not negotiable. Moonlight Magic is one of those things where if it lined up with a trip we already had, I would love to go, but would we make a special trip just to go down to Moonlight Magic? I don't know. In my heart, yes, obviously I want to do that, but logistically it seems very difficult. Then there's access to member lounges. A lot of people seem to really like this, especially the Epcot one, because it's a nice place to escape the crazy crowds, get some air conditioning, and charge your devices. Legitimately, this sounds like a nice perk, and I am excited to access the lounges. But for most resorts, when you're comparing the price to buying on the resale market compared to directly through Disney, I certainly don't think that access is worth the upcharge of buying direct. These are all very nice perks, but I hope that made my opinion pretty clear that they're good extras, but they aren't necessarily worth it. I do honestly still feel that way. So why did we bother buying 150 points then? The perks did play a small factor, and I will touch on that later, but it was primarily a decision of the price with the incentive as well as how we want to vacation. Once you hit 150 points, you had an incentive of $20 off per point. For us, this was a meaningful amount and definitely pushed us to 150 points instead of 100. The other really big thing was the points chart. If I want to host my family at Disneyland, there will be at least 7 of us, so we will definitely need a 2-bedroom villa. And there are children involved, so I'm assuming we are going during that summer time frame. This would be about 260 to 275 points, just depending on how many weeknights versus weekend nights would be involved. Also, because there's kids involved, I imagine we would want to do 3 to 4 nights. Our pace in the parks would definitely be slower, and I think it's very important to have the hotel room to go back to midday. Normally, if I'm traveling with just myself and my partner, we plan on our arrival night and probably our departure night being at hotels outside of Disney Vacation Club to save on points a little bit. But again, with my family's traveling down with kids, I don't really want to put them through that. I want them to be able to just land, go to the hotel, stay there, and then sleep there the night also before they are flying out. That's why I think 4 nights is going to be necessary. This would give us 2 to 3 park days with some leisure time. We might be able to get away with 3 nights, especially as the kids grow older, but it's not something I want to bank on. And obviously the travel period matters a lot here. That dictates how many points you would be spending. I have the flexibility to go with my partner in January, the cheapest season, but I think it's highly unlikely that my family with their kids are going to come down during January. So unfortunately, I can't be super cheap here when I'm thinking about hosting my family. The other obvious time that would work for hosting my family in Disney is December break. That, of course, is even more expensive than the summer, though. During this December break time, a 2-bedroom for 4 nights is going to be over 300 points. All that considered, a 100-point contract pooled fully over 3 years, so banking all 100 points into one use year, borrowing all 100 points into that use year, then we would have 300 points total. That would probably work. We would probably be able to make that work definitely for at least a summer trip. I think December would be out of the question unless we did less nights, which would be negotiable certainly with my family, but we could probably make the 100-point contract work if we worked really hard at it. That being said, 150 points just gives us so much more flexibility. Not only to host my family more regularly, potentially every other year instead of every 3 years, or every 3 years for an additional night or two. Not to mention December now becomes an option as opposed to only the summer or other times when the kids would have to be pulled out of school. But in addition to using the points ourselves, obviously if my family didn't want to go every other year, we would have this backlog of points. Of course, we could use those ourselves at Walt Disney World to stay for longer, although that's unlikely with our work constraints, or to stay in larger accommodations, 1-bedrooms instead of deluxe studios. The other obvious option, though, is renting out points to try to make some money back to help pay off dues. Personally, renting out the points we don't plan on using is the most attractive option to us, and again, having 150 points to rent out for any 1 year instead of 100 gives us more flexibility to rent out more points. Selfishly, I was also thinking about the near-term future. I have an August use year, which is obviously awkward for summer trips as June and July are happening right before my use year turns over. But if we wanted to host my family in August of 2024, we could with our 2024 points and points borrowed from 2025. Or if they wanted to wait until 2025, we simply bank our 2024 points and then we use those bank points and the 2025 points. I spoke to my family about near-term travel plans and summer of 2024 sounds pretty unlikely. This means if we're counting on summer of 2025 as the earliest possible trip, we can definitely bank our 2024 points, have our 2025 points, and then depending on where in the summer that falls, if it's June, July, or August, potentially we could borrow from 2026 points if we really wanted to make it a big trip. With 100 points, we could make 2025 work. We would bank the 2024 points, use the 2025 points, borrow from 2026, but it would have to be in August. We couldn't really make that work if we were going in June or July. Just generally speaking, we'd have to be a lot more careful and considerate about how we're moving points around to do these vacations. And although hosting my family in summer of 2024 is unlikely, it would be pretty much impossible to do for more than just a couple of nights with only a 100-point contract. Again, that 150-point contract is giving us more flexibility. Of course, 150 points is going to cost more than 100 points both in the initial purchase price and every year when we were paying annual dues on a per point basis. Let's go over the initial purchase price at least. I know some of you were interested in this. The rack rate when Villas at Disneyland Hotel debuted was $230 per point. Starting at 150 points, you did get a $20 per point incentive, so that brought the cost down to $210 per point. Then there was also Magical Beginnings. With a direct purchase of at least 150 points, you could sell back your first use year's worth of points and get $22 per point back. In my case, the Magical Beginnings money is coming back as a rebate later. It was not taken off my initial purchase price. But effectively, when you combine Magical Beginnings and the incentive, that brought down the initial purchase price to $188 per point. For a direct purchase, that's actually not that bad. We paid in cash, so our closing costs were fairly minimal. There was a $250 document prep fee and about $130 in closing costs. The amount we're actually charging to our credit cards then is that $210 per point for 150 points, plus the doc fee, plus the closing costs, and so that's about $32,000. And within 1 month of final payment, I'll receive a check in the mail for the Magical Beginnings amount of $3,300. You can use that Magical Beginnings money for whatever you want. Obviously, we will be using it to pay off this purchase. So all in all, 150 direct points cost us about $28,500. There is the asterisk here of we sold back our 2023 points, so we don't have any 2023 points. Then, of course, we do still have to pay our annual dues, and when we stay at Villas at Disneyland Hotel, we will have to pay the additional cost of the transient occupancy taxes as well. Had we instead purchased a 100-point contract, there would have been no incentive pricing. So 100 points times $230 per point is $23,000, plus the $250 document prep fee and some amount of closing costs. The total would probably end up being a little bit under $23,500. I do not believe a 100-point direct purchase would have been eligible for Magical Beginnings. But let's step aside into a pretend universe where this would have qualified. Had this been possible, you'd be selling back your first use year's worth of points, 100 points for $22 per point, so $2,200. That would bring your total cost down closer to $21,000 or so. But even in a pretend world where a 100-point contract would have been eligible for Magical Beginnings, we would not have done it. We would have banked our 2023 points into 2024. And remember, I have an August use year, so banking my points would be August 2023 into August 2024. That then would mean that for June or July of 2025, we would have 2023 points, 2024 points, and we could borrow 2025 points to make that work. And as time went on, if it looked like we would not be taking a family vacation at that time, we could use those points for ourselves or we could rent them out. But I certainly would not do Magical Beginnings right away and limit the ability to travel during June or July 2025 to host my family. All in all, a 100-point contract would have been a little bit more than $23,000, and with incentives and Magical Beginnings, we were able to get a 150-point contract for only about $5,000 more right now. To me, that was definitely worth it. And I want to be super clear, if you're looking at Disney Vacation Club overall and you are not married to the idea of having a Disneyland home resort, that Villas at Disneyland Hotel is definitely not your best deal. It is not the best value for your money by far, but it absolutely works for us and checks off the boxes of the things that we care about the most. When considering 100 points versus 150 points, of course, also being a full member at 150 points is a side benefit, and we did discuss it. We talked about all those primary benefits like discounts on food, access to the member cruise, access to annual passes, etc. At the end of the day, I think the biggest perk for us, though, of becoming full members is knowing that as long as we retain this 150-point direct contract, we will not be subject to any other future changes. Being a resale member has worked out totally fine for us, but knowing that I have the freedom to not pay attention to all of these policy changes, knowing that they won't affect me because now I'm a full member, is priceless. It's not actually priceless, obviously, but that is a huge factor that you can't put monetary value on. And as full members, moving forward, of course, we will make use of that discount when we dine at eligible places. We are toying with the idea of buying Sorcerer's Pass, knowing that we would lose money on it, but it would give our vacation more flexibility. And of course, Moonlight Magic and the member cruise, etc., that's all in the back of my mind. It's probably going to happen at some point in the future, but no immediate plans. The other thing that made buying 150 points over 100 points pretty easy for us was that we have been saving for this really aggressively for a while now. We have the literal liquid cash to pay off a $30,000 purchase. So when we framed it as spend $5,000 more now to get 150 points instead of 100 points, and we had that money, it was a pretty easy decision. Overall, as with any timeshare purchase, and in my opinion, especially when you're picking a home resort for Disney Vacation Club, it really comes down to what do you value. For me, this comes down to more than a strictly monetary consideration. If all I was trying to do was get the most bang for my buck in terms of vacation points, Villas at Disneyland Hotel is not the right choice. But this is the simplest way for me moving forward to host my family at Disneyland and hopefully make a lot of magical memories for them for years to come. I hope this peek behind the scenes into our reasoning of buying at Villas at Disneyland to begin with and then also buying 150 points was interesting for you. Thanks again so much to everyone who has liked the video and subscribed to the channel. I really appreciate your support. I have no idea when we're actually going to stay at Villas at Disneyland Hotel. Like I said, it may be several years from now, but hey, at least that's an option now, and I'm looking forward to whenever that happens. If you bought into Villas at Disneyland Hotel, I would love to hear in the comments down below what were big factors for you. Similarly, if you decided to absolutely not buy into Villas at Disneyland Hotel, I'd love to hear about that too. And as always, the comments in YouTube are usually the best place to converse with me, but if you want to find me outside of YouTube, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at PixieDustPhD. Finally, I just really want to emphasize that while I know this sounds hypocritical now, I still really feel like the full membership benefit perks probably aren't worth it. So if you're debating between a resale contract that will save you $40+ a point compared to buying direct, I would still probably say resale is going to work out for you. But you do you, especially if you value those membership extras a ton, and certainly if you have the disposable income to cover the difference in cost. May the rest of your day be magical, and we'll see you real soon at Pixie Dust PhD.